science of the Antahkarana is one of the three major sciences in the Aquarian Age, we are told by the Tibetan. Of course, the Aquarian Age has the fifth ray of science coming through it. It's the only ray to come through it. And it's associated with the second ray of love wisdom as well, and also the seventh ray of ceremonial order or magic, because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. But in terms of occult science, these three major sciences are the science of the Antahkarana, the science of meditation, and the science of service. There you have the three aspects, as it were, that I'm just going to show you here further on down the track. No, I'm not. I'll get to that later. You can see there are many kind of sub-levels here of, for instance, with the science of the Antahkarana, there's the mystical realization of duality, the problem of the integrated personality, vision of the soul, the central self, the problem of the mystic. We are all mystics learning to be occultists. Mystic is that intuitive heart realization. Occultism is the next stage after that we're learning here in learning how to use our minds and how to work with the universal occult laws. So then there's the occult identification or at-one-ment, the integration of soul and personality, the mind as the intermediary, the problem of equilibrium or steadiness, and C, the application of concepts to the immediate educational necessity. So it's quite involved, it's quite intricate, and it's a bit like doing a university course, you could say, but there's no qualification at the end of it. Well, there is, but after a few lifetimes, you might take initiation. Hugh here says, how can we visualize the group personality and soul when we have scarcely met one another except for an occasional question without voice or video on? It doesn't matter, Hugh, about necessarily concretizing an image. It's just the thought form is enough to imagine the group that is here now and the combined soul energy of that group working through the combined personality energy of that group. Heidi asked why only one Om after the great invocation. I sounded 3 Oms. I'm not sure whether your sound cut out or not. Anyway, moving on. We've got a fair bit of information to get through today, and I don't want to overload you all with technical stuff, but at the same time, it can't not be mentioned. So, and bear in mind that whatever you doesn't sink in today, you can always go back over. In the books themselves, the blue books, of course, and in the videos of this class. So I noticed still, just to mention for those who weren't here before, that the 3 or 4 latecomers during the meditation, please try and get here on time for the meditation. Try and get 5 minutes early before the hour that the class starts on, if you can. Thank you. So here's a passage from DK. But to build the Antahkarana is to relate the 3 divine aspects. This involves intense mental activity. It necessitates the power to imagine and to visualize, plus a dramatic attempt to build the lighted way in mental substance. This mental substance is, as we have seen, of 3 qualities or natures, and the bridge of living light is a composite creation. That's what the Antahkarana is. It's the rainbow bridge. And these 3 parts are force, focused and projected from the fused and blended forces of the personality. Force being distinct from energy, which is drawn from the egoic body or the soul by conscious effort. And energy abstracted from the spiritual triad. We'll just go over that in a minute, what the spiritual triad is, Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. So it is essentially, however, an activity of the integrated and dedicated personality. Esotericists must not take the position that all they have to do is to await negatively some activity by the soul, which will automatically take place after a certain measure of soul contact has been achieved, and that consequently and in time, this activity will evoke response from both the personality and the triad. This is not the case. The work of the building of the Antahkarana is primarily an activity of the personality aided by the soul. This in time evokes a reaction from the triad. Then he admonishes his students by saying, there is far too much inertia demonstrated by aspirants at this time. So, and coming back to our planes of perception chart, this is a slightly different one that I found somewhere on my computer, which simplifies the Atma Buddhi Manas triangle. We have the plane of Atma, the spiritual plane here, the spiritual will and this dot here. We have the Buddhic plane and the Buddhic permanent atom, as it's called, linking with the Atmic permanent atom. And of course, those two linking with the mental permanent atom, the mind. And which of course is on the higher three subplanes of the mental plane, which is the seat of the soul. That there is your Atma Buddhi Manas. Mental substance in 3 grades must be used. We are essentially the monad, of course. That's our essential spiritual essence. The monad resides in the monadic plane. And of course, we are threefold, the spiritual monad, the soul, and the personality. True education in the New Age will be around the building of the Antahkarana, as it's one of the 3 main sciences. The new true science of mind uses mental substance for the building of a bridge between personality and soul. Later, between the soul and the monad. But for most of us, at this point, between the personality and the soul. It is also built through the triangle of the 3 aspects of study, meditation, and service. Study being the 3rd aspect to do with the mind, meditation to do with the 2nd aspect, the heart, and service to do with the 1st aspect, the head. Head, heart, and throat centers, you could say. The rainbow bridge. So the Antahkarana education involves the primary objectives of alignment of mind and brain through right understanding of the etheric body of the chakras. Hence, we have different classes for all these different themes. And after we put all those themes together, the whole starts to make much more sense, and we start to connect the dots, so to speak. To construct a bridge between mind, brain, and soul, producing an integrated personality, the vehicle of the soul. To build a bridge between lower mind, soul, and higher mind, so as to achieve illumination of the personality. The Antahkarana is the way back, or path of return, which we evolve from ourselves. We are like the spider and its thread. We become the path itself. DK uses this analogy several times in his writings. The Antahkarana is built by the substance of the higher 3 mental subplanes. It facilitates the flow of consciousness. The Antahkarana is the thread of your own consciousness. So, the Antahkarana is built by the substance of the higher 3 subplanes of the mental plane. So, let us just take our attention first to the left-hand side of this page, the writing, and then we'll explore these diagrams. The Satrapma, life and consciousness threads. The life thread, the silver cord of the Satrapma, is, as far as man is concerned, dual in nature. The life thread proper, which is one of the 2 threads which constitute the Satrapma, is anchored in the heart, whilst the other thread, which embodies the principle of consciousness, is anchored in the head. So I'd just like to mention at this point too, if that life thread is broken, then that's when death ensues because of its anchoring in the heart. Of course, the consciousness thread can be severed temporarily if a person is in a coma, but they don't die. In the work of the evolutionary cycle, however, man has to repeat what God has already done. He must himself create both in the world of consciousness and of life. Like a spider, man spins connecting threads and thus bridges and makes contact with his environment, thereby gaining experience and sustenance. The spider symbol is often used in the ancient occult books and the scriptures of India in connection with this activity of the human being. These threads which man creates are triple in number, and with the two basic threads which have been created by the soul, constitute the 5 types of energy which make man a conscious human being. Of course, the 5-pointed star with the man standing with his arms akimbo comes to mind. Now, in this diagram here, we have the life thread. You probably can't read it very well. Here, this point here that goes to the heart, the physical heart, in fact, as well as the heart chakra. Okay. And the consciousness thread anchored in the head, the crown chakra. This is just one representation of this. There are many other diagrams that people have made. These 3 levels are called the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna nadis, these 3 main channels that go up the spine. And they're represented, of course, in the caduceus that we see in Western medicine, surmounted by the wings of the soul. Of course, with regard to the silver cord, we see the person going out of their body at night. The cord, in this case, is emanating from the head, but you'll see other diagrams where the cord actually emanates from the solar plexus center. And this depends on the stage of evolution of the individual. For most of humanity, it's from the solar plexus center, more advanced humanity from the head center. Like any science, you have to learn the terminology, the jargon, as it's called too, which is, terminology is probably a better word. Just like in any other exoteric science. Sutratma, life thread, consciousness thread, crown chakra, heart chakra, and of course all the Indian or Hindu names for those are quite evocative as well when you explore those. Another diagram here, just before we go into that. Rachel says, when you sleep, if the cord is located at the solar plexus, does that mean that the person goes to the astral plane during sleep? If the cord is anchored at the head, does it mean the person goes to the mental plane during sleep? Not necessarily. I couldn't say for certain on that, sorry. We all spend time on the astral plane or going through the astral plane every night. Some of us spend more time on the mental plane. It all depends what particular area that we're involved in, the hall of learning, the hall of wisdom, and so forth, as they're called. So on the left here, we have 3 very simple circles. The monad, energizing the spiritual triad, the soul, that calls the body, expressing itself through the 3 aspects of mind, which are the 3 higher subplanes of the mental plane, and the personality reflecting the threefold soul, and the Antahkarana, which is built from lifetime to lifetime. So we pick up on the building from previous lives. In each incarnation, we resume our building processes through service, meditation, study, and actually employing the conscious science or the conscious building of the Antahkarana through the science of the Antahkarana. And these things, this science has been built in as part of the general need to speed up human evolution because we have fallen behind, as I've mentioned before several times, through the failure of the moon chain. And so over here on the right-hand side, we have the triple threads created by a man are anchored in the solar plexus, the head and the heart. Okay. When the astral body and the mind and nature are beginning to function as a unit, and the soul also is consciously connected, do not forget that it is always unconsciously linked to the soul. An extension of this 5-fold thread, the basic 2 and the human 3, is carried to the throat center. And when that occurs, man can become a conscious creator on the physical plane. From these major lines of energy, lesser lines can radiate at will. It is upon this knowledge that all future intelligent psychic unfoldment must be based. Intelligent psychic unfoldment. Interesting phrase, because we're using the intelligent for the mental plane and psychic unfoldment is for the astral plane. The visualization that we do is an astral activity, and we combine that with a mental activity in meditation and in this science of the Antahkarana. This diagram on the right is quite a good graphic example of that you can use yourself if you want to in meditation, visualizing that light going up to the soul and further on up to the monad if you wish. But you have to be careful about invoking through your enthusiasm too much energy that you're not equipped yet to deal with. And so I'd remind everyone with this Dhyana meditation, as we call it, the discipleship, the New Age meditation, once a week may well be sufficient for some of you. Doing it every day may be a little bit too much for some of you. You have to go steady in not too much invoking of energies that just in a, what do they call it? The middle way. So the Antahkarana is woven as a result of the appearance of life. It is a responsive agent in all sentient reactions. Note that word woven, because the mind is governed by the third ray. Well, the third ray is generically the mind, if you like, ruled by a Saturn that rules the throat center, the seat of the mental body. And so one of the names for the third ray is the weaver. And that's what the Antahkarana building is about. It's about weaving. So you can employ these kind of images when you visualize doing this meditation or this work. We're going to look at the actual steps of the meditation later on for this building of the Antahkarana. You can see yourself knitting or weaving something, weaving in light, weaving in color. The Antahkarana, the first half of which is built by the personality linking to the soul and the mental substance. The second half is the soul linking to the triad, or what we call light substance. This building only starts when one is mentally focused. And let's face it, in this world today, it is so easy to be astrally distracted. It's the phrase I use, because most of humanity is astrally oriented. And so most of the stuff that we get through our media that we're bombarded by on the internet and television and so forth, it has a very astral substance to it. And we have to be careful not to drown in that sort of substance, to be in the world but not of it, so to speak. Inez says the thread of consciousness is already in existence and we are merely activating it, or are we actually building it? A good question. I would say both at this point, which doesn't really answer your question, but one must distinguish between the thinker, the soul, the apparatus of thought, the mind, brain, and the thought itself, or the thought form. Of course, we had a class on thought forms recently. See how the last few classes are linked. Meditation, thought forms, building of the Antahkarana, they're all interrelated to one another. And so this simple triangle here looks at the three threads, the life thread, which is anchored in the heart and embodies the first aspect, the consciousness thread, which is anchored in the head, embodies the second aspect of love, wisdom, excuse me, and the third creative thread, which is the weaver, is the spider spinning its thread. Thought's dual esoteric function, a recognition and receptivity to ideas, The creative faculty of conscious thought form building constitutes the second half of building of the Antahkarana. The disciple consciously projects through the controlled and directed mind into the intuitive realm or the Buddhic plane. And then a reciprocal activity is then set up, a response between lower mind and higher mind. And we call this invocation and evocation, which we'll get to in a minute in more detail. And so in this diagram, we have spiritual will or purpose at the top of this triangle, the top triangle, higher mind on the left-hand side and universal love on the right-hand side. I would swap places with these two actually, because anyway, but you have the first aspect, second aspect, and third aspect. Then you have the rainbow bridge linking to the triangle of the personality, which is facing the other way, the rational mind, the emotional body, the physical body. And again, you have the first aspect with the rational mind, the second aspect with the emotional body being a lower reflection of love, you see, as the rational mind is a lower reflection of higher mind, and the physical body. And of course, when you merge those two triangles together, you get the so-called Star of David, the six-pointed star, as depicted here in this flower of life geometry. That's another good symbol to use for when you're visualizing the triangle of your own personality, when you're doing your integration for the personality. You can see, rather than two orbs of light, which I've been suggesting so far, you can see two triangles like that, the triangle of the higher self merging and blending with the triangle of the lower self, creating the six-pointed star, which is radiating light, of course. Heidi says, sometimes the brain functions through associations. How can we avoid it? Well, indeed, this is part of the process of concentration, the first stage of meditation. When we get thoughts floating around in our aura that might have been floating around there for half our lives, we have to keep the mind on track. We have to focus. We have to allow some of those thoughts to die of attrition, to not feed them, so to speak. That's just one answer that can be answered in several different ways, probably. So again, we have another simple diagram. The circle up here being the monad, the spirit, which we all will return to eventually. We have the causal body here, the soul, with the heart in the center, and we have the personality. We have the consciousness thread here, anchored in the head center. We have the life thread anchored in the heart. There's the Antahkarana, consciousness threads, and so forth. So, eventually, as I've said before, once we take the higher initiations and become liberated, the personality will merge with the monad. And there'll be a few lives, or maybe just one life, where that is the case, where there's the merged, the causal body is destroyed and is no longer used. The person is at one with the monad. So the technique of construction. Here we enter into some more detail. Knowledge force expresses itself through the consciousness thread and the creative thread, okay? Down these two threads. These two threads are, for the disciple, a fusion of past knowledge with the consciousness thread and the present, the creative thread. The life thread, or Sutratma proper, is closely blended with these two. You then have Atma Buddhi Manas, Manas being the agent, or mind being the agent of creation, functioning to a certain degree consciously in the aspirant. Notice I'm using different words here, the aspirant, the disciple. Technically speaking, the path of aspiration comes before the path of discipleship, but we are all aspirants, from the very lowest up to the being we know as Lord Maitreya. The fusion of personality and soul in process, but when it has reached a certain point, is in process, I should say, but when it has reached a certain point, it becomes apparent a creative activity of the will is needed to bridge between the spiritual triad and the personality via the soul. So again, have the spiritual triad here, the soul at this level, personality in these lower three levels. The bridge which must be constructed is called technically the Antahkarana. The bridge has to be built by the aspirant focused upon the mental plane because it is mental substance in 3 grades which must be used. And the 3 aspects of the mind, the monastic permanent atom, the sum of mind or ego, soul, and the mental unit are all involved in this process. And I realize here, going, what the hell is he talking about? The sum of mind, ego, permanent atom, mental unit. I mean, and that's why I've been saying in this course so far to print the original diagram we sent out to you in the first class with all the subplanes shown here and all the little details of the mental unit, of the subplanes and so forth. In this one we can see the Antahkarana as a dotted line going from the mental permanent atom or the mind atom to the mental unit down here on the higher subplane of the concrete subplanes. All right. This is how intricate and specific this is. Of course, we're looking at a 2-dimensional diagram, I remind you, where really this simplifies a 4th-dimensional reality. Gisela says that she likes that diagram. Yeah, it's a bit more simple. And of course, you can make your own diagrams according to your own taste that will help you to really get a handle on the whole thing. I know people who have done, colored them in, written various things in the subplanes and so forth. Whatever helps you the most. And you can see these other lines here going from the, could get my glasses on here, I can hardly read it. From these points of the egoic body, Atma Buddhi Manas, down to the triangle on the physical plane of the alter major center, the pineal gland, and the pituitary body, okay? Passing through the physical permanent atom and the astral permanent atom and the mental unit at the same time. So a very interesting relationship here. You can do a screen capture of that when you watch the video, and then you can blow it up if you like on your own computer. I mean, enlarge it, not, you know what I mean. Where's the causal body in the diagram, says Diane? Well, it's here. It's where it says ego in this triangle. Back here, it's this ovoid circle, which is the causal body is usually depicted as. As I say before, don't worry if you can't get this straight away, this information. That the ageless wisdom is ageless, it's timeless, it's always there to come back to. And I have to admit that having constructed this course over 20 years ago, I really need to do this course again myself to remind myself every time I prepare a class and put it from its original form into PowerPoint. I realize how much I might have forgotten or passed over in some cases, or still don't understand even. So don't be daunted if you don't understand. We're all still learners and aspirants in terms of us being mystics, learning these universal laws. All right, so the Atma Buddhi Manas triangle, just to repeat, repetition doesn't hurt at all in occultism. It really helps to just, make it sink in. The mental substance in 3 grades to be used in the building of the Antahkarana, so forth and so on. All right, now this is a very interesting diagram which I'm fond of referring to in my newsletters. I call it the three flasks or trumpets, because it's actually energy going down and it's also energy going up. And again, it mirrors this new science of invocation. In fact, the science of the Antahkarana will be called the science of invocation and evocation in the Aquarian age, we're told. And so what we have at the top here are the 7 ray energies pouring through the flask, if you like, of Shambhala, the Lord of the world, the way of high evolution and its 7 paths. And that's being stepped down. You've got energy stepping down through these flasks. I think I might have discussed this in another class, but in this flask we have the hierarchy, the masters of wisdom, the soul consciousness, love, wisdom, and the various initiations of the 6th initiation, the Christ, the 5th initiation, which makes the master of wisdom. Okay, equating with it. And then you have the 4th and 3rd and 2nd initiations in this at the bottom of this flask. The 1st initiation right down here. And so this is humanity in this flask here. And this flask, or these lines here, represent the Antahkarana. The Antahkarana is represented by the upright line from the initiate to the Christ. The 1st initiation to the Christ. So all of us, most of us anyway, some of us may not have taken the 1st initiation yet, but most people on the path who are inquiring in the path today have taken at least the 1st initiation and are spending the lives required to reach the 2nd degree and so forth and so on. So we've talked about the new group of world servers before, who are a bridge between humanity and hierarchy. Well, that new group of world servers are initiates of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd initiation, and the 4th probably too. So they are the Antahkarana. That is the Antahkarana in this case is the new group of world servers that bridges between humanity and hierarchy. So the energy pours down, 7 rays and so forth. But then there's aspiration where we're moving up into the broader spheres of consciousness. This is the trumpet. When we look at it from this point of view, from the point of view of going upwards, as we flow into the trumpet at the mouthpiece, if you like, down here, it starts to expand and gets wider and wider and wider. The more we invoke, the more energy is evoked from the higher levels. Invocation, evocation. We invoke, the universal law is obliged to evoke. Okay, Irina says, it's truly amazing how knowledge information evolving itself like flower from seed, we just have to evolve with it to keep evolving. Indeed, it's a good analogy. The seed to the flower and the flower from the seed, and around it keeps going in an endless cycle. Yes, this diagram is like an ever-growing flower. And, you know, the science of symbols is another factor that's where a picture says 1,000 words. We can get something intuitively, immediately, just through a good diagram or a picture. All right. And that's what the soul uses in meditation too, because it's drawing upon all your experience and that which is locked up in the memory, in the mind, to give you very specific images, either in dream experience or meditation experience, that are powerful symbols for you to use or to recognize a certain teaching or quality. Another diagram, the monad again with its 3 aspects. Everything is triple. The egoic lotus, which is triple, and it's triple because it's made up of the so-called 3 levels of petals within the egoic lotus. Sacrifice petals, the 3 sacrifice petals, the 3 knowledge petals, and the 3 love petals, which makes 9. Then there's the inner core, which is also 3, the bud of the lotus, if you like. Anyway, that egoic lotus is linked in the other, as we looked at in the other diagram, to the monastic permanent atom, the Antahkarana, and their mental unit. Remember, we looked at this one here. We look at these 3 here. So it's another way of expressing that relationship. And of course, we have the Antahkarana here to the monad. Or the nomad, as I like to call him. So we've got through a bit of that material. Oh, that's right, yeah. And a quote by the Tibetan, and there's a lot of this information about the Antahkarana in the book called Rays and Initiations. That's what RI stands for down here, page 467. The Tibetan says, one of the points which is essential that students should grasp is the deeply esoteric fact that this Antahkarana is built through the medium of a conscious effort within consciousness itself, and not just by attempting to be good or to express goodwill or to demonstrate the qualities of unselfishness and high aspiration. Many esotericists seem to regard the treading of the path as the conscious effort to overcome the lower nature and to express life in terms of right living and thinking, love and intelligent understanding. It is all that, but it is something far more. Good character and good spiritual aspiration are basic essentials, but these are taken for granted by the master, who has a disciple under training. Their foundation and their recognition and development are the objectives upon the path of probation. So there's a path of aspiration, and there are several paths between sub-paths, if you like, between the path of aspiration and the path of discipleship, where one is put on probation, a probationary disciple that shows promise. And just like probation in the outer world, where we are put on probation after we get out of jail, and so it is in a sense in terms of trying us out, of admitting us into a certain magnetic ring pass knot of the ashram of the master. And if we behave ourselves, we gain full-time admittance to it. But if we get a bit unstable or spectacular or radical in our reception of this new, more powerful energy within the ashram, can cause a lot of reactions in the personality. Then we get pushed back out to the outer ring of the ashram until we get ourselves together, either in that life or in several lifetimes, to be admitted back once more. And the master has in a sense, if you, it's a kind of a funny image, but he can see a disciple in training just by a little square or circle of light that has a certain hue. He can look at a glance to tell where an aspirant or disciple is at, because there'll be certain colors that will represent and certain frequencies that are being added that will tell the master that person is ready for initiation or is ready to be put on probation, so to speak. So very interesting. There's a whole book I'd like to write about that, actually, but just to touch on that, to bear in mind that there are 49 ashrams within the greater ashram of the Christ, and we all belong or are gravitating towards one of these ashrams, depending on our soul ray and depending on our karmic affiliations with one of these masters who are at the center of these ashrams. And only half of them have manifested thus far. The rest of them will manifest probably during the next 2,000 odd years, I would imagine, during the age of Aquarius. Anyway, I digress. And before we go into this next stage, a couple more questions. Andy says, is it like being sent back for rethreading? Yeah, I guess you could say. Irina says, is the probation another way to arrive to the true light after all? Of course, it is a necessary stage to pass through. We all go through it or have gone through it at one stage or another. You could even say that the Christ is on probation for evolution into a much greater world beyond the solar system, eventually. So the 6 stages of the building process: intention, visualization, projection, invocation, evocation, stabilization, resurrection. I've associated some astrological signs with this, which I'm not going to go into now. But the first 3 are the most important and are the work of the personality: intention, visualization, projection. And they're the most detailed as well. And so let's run through them. Intention is the focusing of energy on the mental plane at a point of greatest possible tension. The tension of intention. The concentrating of energy needed to carry out purpose in manifesting. Hold the mind steady in the light. That should be all of our mantras in many ways. When we're meditating and we're being distracted, we bring the mind back to the center. We hold the mind steady in the light continuously. Steps in building the Antahkarana. A, achievement of right orientation towards the soul by the personality, towards the triad by the soul. 2 levels there. Mental understanding of the task to be carried out, using the mind in 2 ways. Of course, you can visualize these planes if it helps you too, when you're doing this visualization process. C, responsiveness to Buddhic impression and active creative imagination. You see the astral plane, which is about imagination, is the point of least resistance for the Buddhic plane. It's like the Buddhic energy skips the mental plane and has its point of least resistance on the emotional plane. And we talk about some aspirants and disciples, depending on their race structure, who are more Buddhic, astral Buddhic, as we call them. And obviously, ultimately, we have a blend of mental and intuitional, ultimately. And so we have astral Buddhic people and we have mental physical people. It's more the odd ray line 1357, and the Buddhic astral is more the even line of rays 246. So responsiveness to Buddhic impression. D, energy gathering and force absorption. So notice these 2 words again. Energy, or put it this way, force is energy stepped down. This is something that the Tibetan talks about in his book, A Treatise on White Magic. Force and energy, to distinguish between them. To confine energies in a ring pass knot, to use a Saturnian phrase, the aura, to be used later in visualization projection. This is what we do in the glamour meditation, in fact, from the book on glamour, and we'll have a couple of classes on that later on, where we hold the energy to be used in the, what I call glamour busting, and then we project that energy in projection. That's this word projection, which is one of the stages, of course, the 3rd stage, projection. Then we have a period of clear thinking about the process and intention, a steady preservation of tension without undue strain on the brain cells. And this is true, because sometimes we can have meditations where we feel completely zonked out, because it actually does strain the brain. Some of you may have tried to learn a new language. I know I have a few times, different languages, and it really can knock you out mentally, because you have to change the whole structure of how your thinking processes work. It's a very good thing to stay young and renewed, actually. And likewise with this, it's a similar thing. We're learning a language, the language of occultism. And E, a period of clear thinking about the process and intention, a steady preservation of tension without undue strain, then the soul and personality will be aligned. So you can take this and go through this at your own time every day. It doesn't matter if you go through the whole 6 steps or just one step. It's a great way to lay the tracks down in your brain. It'll get easier each time that you do it, like laying down a railroad track for the locomotive of the soul to travel on. Sorry, that was a bit corny, wasn't it? Anyway, Irene is asking if you could please type the title of the book you just mentioned, A Treatise on White Magic. Thanks if you can, Inez. Gisela says, so with a calmer, purified emotional body, we can reflect the Buddhic plane better. Absolutely. I emphasize that a lot. If we're in emotional turmoil, then we'll be seeing through a glass darkly, to use a biblical expression. Visualization. No, Irene, you don't need to concentrate on zodiac signs. That's just a speculative thing, which I'm not going to go into today. You can forget about those, yeah. Second stage, visualization. This is the key to meditation. This is the true Vajrayana Buddhism, as I might have mentioned in the meditation class. The true Tantra, the unification of imagination and mental substance. Male, female. Male being mental, imagination being feminine. On the mental plane, construction of the blueprint of work to be done is started. Imagination from the highest level of the astral is drawn upon, the highest subplanes of the astral, which we call heaven. The lower subplanes, of course, being hell. So we don't want to draw from that level. The sensitivity astral opposite, of course, to the Buddhic sensitivity, as I mentioned before, the Buddhic plane, the astral plane, Buddhic astral, astral Buddhic. Disciples have purified their imagination so they are responsive to Buddhic intuitive perception. Purifying the imagination, interesting phrase, is it not? Because we can get caught up in some very dark thoughts at times. We can get caught up in a kind of a morbid reflection on something that, depending on our karma, our upbringing, our background, our raise and astrology and all the rest of it. It's the purification of the imagination, which is essentially the purification of the astral body itself, because the imagination emerges from the astral body, has its base in the astral body. Creative imagination has to be stepped up in vibration. Just a moment, I'm going to move this bar here. Keeps on blocking my text. The creative imagination has to be stepped up in its vibratory nature so that it can affect the pool of energy in gathered for bridge building. I don't know what that LC is there. I can't remember what that was for. Creative activity of the imagination is the first organized influence which works upon and within the ring pass knot of accumulated energies held in a state of tension by the intention of the disciple. Creative imagination is an active energy drawn into relationship with the point of tension. The male and the female, the tantra, the weaving on the loom. Of course, we have a picture here, beautiful painting that was in the news recently. Apparently Madonna owns it, called Diana and Endymion. If anyone knows that story in the ancient Greek myths. But of course, it's the male and female. That's why I've used it as an illustration here. It is there and then in there and then weaving on the loom sorry, I've made a typo there, and then produces effects in mental substance. It is there and then produces effects in mental substance. Tension is thereby increased, and the more potent and clear the visualization process, the more beautiful and strong will be the bridge. The more that you do this, practice makes perfect, as they say. The more that you do this, the more that you will be assisted by your higher self. No question about that. And you'll get images dropping into your mind and you go, where did that come from? This is amazing. I'll use that. Thanks very much. Visualization renders the creative imagination active, responsive, attractive to a point of tension on the mental plane. At this point, the disciple is occupied with energy, quiescent and held within the ring pass knot at a point of extreme tension. Another energy, picture forming, outgoing and responsive to the mind of the bridge builder, the male and the female. The disciple must work slowly at this point, picturing stages of the work. What will be the resulting effects of planned activity? What are the materials with which there is to work? Light, colour, sound. We can see here again the intricacy of this science. I know some people who are fully absorbed in occult meditation like this. They're very unassuming people on the outer plane, and not many people know what they do, but they are totally consumed with this kind of work. They work subjectively all the time in many group meditations around the world, by the way. And they are very skilled at doing all these stages. You can see how this is the highest kind of service work that we can offer as aspirants upon the path to the greater plan. So the disciple endeavors to visualize the whole process and so set up a rapport between the Buddhic intuition and the creative imagination of the astral body. At this point, we have Buddhic activity of impression, the tension of the mental vehicle as it holds energy at the point of projection, and the imaginative process of the astral body. Of course, when we talk about a disciple, we could be talking about an initiate at a very advanced stage of initiation as well. Because theoretically, a third-degree initiate could do this and reach the fourth initiation by practicing this meditation properly, far quicker than would otherwise might be the case. These are the tools in the occult toolbox that we've been given. We've been given a great gift with these teachings. So we reach the third stage of projection, and we've got the projector here, which is a good symbol, I think. You can see this circle here being the third eye, perhaps, or the Ajna center. The most critical point in the disciple's task is projection. The bridge building is will and continued visualization, and we can use a ray word of power. In Rays and Initiations at this page number, there are certain ray methods of sounding the word, etc. Again, I would advise taking care if any of you choose to do this, because really with some of this work, it's very powerful, and you can be literally playing with fire. Don't let ambition make you try and cut corners. Building slowly, steadily, slow and steady wins the race, as they say. Projection is a living process or aspiration growing out of a conscious daily experience and dependent upon the expression of the divine aspects in the life upon the physical plane as far as possible. Projection is one calling in of the will aspect, and this is what we do in our dhyana meditation, do we not? We call in the will from the head center. 2, preservation of the triple state of awareness in order that the disciple is aware constantly of his own identity, personality versus the soul, is conscious of a fixed point of tension, and is aware of activity of the soul ray, maybe, for some of us, and sees the color of that ray through which the monad is expressing. Wow. I don't think I've got there yet. 3, projection is when you start to use that distinctive ray energy correctly, for instance, if you know you are a second ray soul, and it wouldn't hurt to work with a second ray even if you aren't a second ray soul, because all the rays are a sub-ray essentially of the great second ray. When all of the above is completed, and we uses the word of power associated with the ray, which is the agent of the will. So those first three stages relate to the personality. The last three stages, as I said before, the future science, the Antahkarana, will be called the invocation and evocation. The last three stages are evocation. They're expressions of the response from higher levels, the evocation, the higher levels of spiritual life. You know, soul's going, hang on a second, he's starting to meditate. I can see a bit more chance of making an impression, a soul impression. He could be getting too close to reversing the wheel. And if the personality keeps on making those efforts, then the higher self or soul will draw closer. Invocation by the personality, evocation by the soul. As I said, the three preceding stages where personality work, invocation is based upon intention, visualization, projection, has registered on higher levels of consciousness. The disciple is recognized as a point of invocative tension, is recognized by the master who's watching. And the master is watching thousands of disciples, by the way. They're very, very busy. They certainly don't have time for personal contact, as many aspirants think, except perhaps at a very important stage where they may go for an interview with the master within the ashram. That might come back in the memory from a dream state or a meditation state. But that's another thing. There is then a going forth towards the Antahkarana, along which the body, soul, life can travel. The father or the monad working through the thread now goes forth to meet the son or the soul. Of course, the three aspects, the Father, Son, and the Holy Goat, as Rowan Atkinson called him in that movie, the Holy Ghost or the Mother, Father, Son, Mother. It's another triangle, another triplicity that's worth remembering. And the Mother is the personality, the Son is the soul, Father, the monad. From the higher levels, a line of responsive energy is sent which contacts the lower projection. Thus, the Antahkarana is built. Attention of the lower evokes the attention of the higher. Later in meditation comes a contact between the two projections, the soul, personality, and monad, and a realization of liberation way down the track, getting towards, of course, using that word liberation, the fourth initiation. Agni Edska says, can you please provide more explanation about reversing the wheel? Well, it's basically, I have mentioned it in classes before, I will mention it again in other classes, but essentially it's moving from the generic mutable cross experience and mounting the fixed cross, reversing the focus of your attention in the material realm and becoming more aware of the soul. And so one reverses the wheel. One travels around the zodiac in the opposite direction, as most of humanity does. And if you reverse the wheel, you reverse it literally. You start treading the other way, going through the zodiac signs. You could write a whole book about that too. I do mention it in various newsletters. So that's the short explanation there. We're running out of time here, and I don't want to rush. We've only got a couple more slides to go, I think. In fact, so stage 5, stabilization. The bridge is now built, tenuous at first and stronger in time. Resurrection, which is the fourth degree or the liberation initiation, which of course, this biblical diagram of the Christ resurrecting the disciple ascends in consciousness into the sphere of monadic life. This is way, way ahead, but it's symbolic of a stage that anyone from the first initiation upwards can experience or get a glimpse of. He is resurrected from the dark cave of the personality life into the blazing light of divinity. These techniques are given to hasten human evolution, as I said before, because of the failure of the moon chain, which I'll talk about in my hidden history video and various articles. Success in building depends upon three things: holding the mind steady in the light, the maximum point of tension constantly. 2, registering consciousness of soul contact, bringing increased fusion of the soul personality. 3, holding in mind, specifically and in detail, the method to be employed in building the bridge according to Ray technique with the objective of relating spiritual triad to personality. It doesn't matter if you don't know your Rays, however. You can work as if, as the Tibetan is fond of saying regularly. Any disciple reaching the stage of projection should ideally know his soul personality Rays and know that their fused and blended potency must perform the act of projection. So all these things do not come at once. I know that. And even people who have been studying their Rays for 30 or 40 years still aren't 100% certain. But the act of investigating the Rays through reading, through reflecting, through meditating is something that can go ahead in parallel with all these other subjects. And lastly, the Tibetan says, from Rays and initiations again, your major need, he's talking to his group of disciples here, your major need is for an intensification of your inner spiritual aspiration. You need to work more definitely from what might be called a point of tension. Study what is said about tension and intensity. It is intensity of purpose which will change you from the plodding, fairly satisfactory aspirant into the disciple whose heart and mind are aflame. Elsewhere, he talks about being alive with the flame of service. Perhaps, however, you prefer to go forward steadily with no group effort, making your work for me and for the group an ordered part of your daily life, which you can adjust pretty much as you like, and in which the life of the spirit receives its reasonable share, in which the service aspect is not neglected, and your life presentation is neatly balanced and carried forward without much real strain. When this is the case, it may be your personality choice or your soul decision for a specific life, but it means that you are not the disciple with everything subordinated to the life of discipleship. And again, there's this kind of a admonishment with a smile there from the Tibetan, I think, a wry smile, because it's human nature to really place ourselves ahead of where we actually are. We don't want to be aspirants. We are disciples. We don't want to be a disciple. We want to be an initiate. But the life of discipleship, as the word implies, is about discipline, which implies the planet Saturn, the ruler of the throat chakra, the seat of the mental body. And of course, the life of discipleship is not easy. It's not a picnic. So something to a sobering thought there to leave on. And of course, we have Kuan Yin here in the picture to the right, holding the flame of truth before her, one of Nicholas Roerich's paintings.